All right, guys, today's submission is from Emma Liz. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Zamara clasped her sword in front of her, to point towards the ground, and bowed. Even though her lungs were screaming for air after completing the drills, she forced herself to breathe steadily. She worked too hard to let them see any weakness. Sir? Sir, I'm busy. All right, so I think the issue that I'm kind of sensing is in this second sentence with this little moment of past continuous. I've said before that I think past simple is where you should stay unless there's a good reason to be out of it. So for past perfect and past continuous, I do think past simple should be your first choice. And if you want to do something else, what's the reason you're doing it? And so we're in past tense. It just doesn't, I don't see the reason here, and I think it makes it sound just a little bit awkward, especially since, the second half of the sentence is not in past continuous, which isn't like a disagreement or anything, but it just feels a little bit awkward. So I'm going to opt to just delete this. Her lungs screamed for air. After completing the drills, but she forced herself to breathe steadily. All right, so Tamara clasped her sword in front of her, the point towards the ground, and bowed. Her lungs screamed for air after completing the drills, but she forced herself to breathe steadily. She had worked too hard to let them see any weakness. So it's a small change, but I think it just makes that sentence sound a little bit simpler and doesn't overcomplicate it. Them was the city's judges, come to evaluate her skills. They applauded politely, like this was a show for their enjoyment. Tamara had been through this routine enough times that she knew what was expected and smiled at them. The smile, she hoped, said that she was proud of her accomplishments. She wasn't, and would happily give them to someone, anyone who wanted them. While I get what's happening here, I'm not going to say that it's incorrect. It just does sound a little bit weird to say them was. Them was the city's judges. Them was the city's judges. Sounds just a tiny bit weird. And I think you can fix that by saying them being the city's judges. It's a small change, but I think it does make it sound a little bit less country. I don't think you're going for country. Them being the city's judges came to evaluate her skills. They applauded politely, like this was a show for their enjoyment. Tamara had been through this routine enough times that she knew what was expected and smiled at them. So kind of like earlier where we've got these 3-section sentences where things are sectioned off. I do like to avoid doing that too much. It's got its place. Like anything, it's got its place. But if you can avoid doing like these double comma things, it can make it sound smoother. It can make your prose flow a little bit more. There are times you want it to be choppy. I don't think this is one of those times. Not feeling the choppiness here. So I would change it to, she hoped the smile said that she was proud of her accomplishments. She wasn't, and would happily give them to someone, anyone who wanted them. So that's another reason why I think this area sounded or felt a little bit awkward to me was because this sentence also has, you just got a lot of commaed off sections going on. That's a lot of pauses when you're trying to read. She wasn't and would happily give them anyone who wanted them. But here, I feel like you should keep it. Like I said, there's always a time and a place for things. And I think this serves a purpose. This is a familiar expression for people. Happily give them to anyone who wanted them. So I feel like that's a little bit more appropriate. There's a reason for that to be sectioned off, or versus up here where it wasn't really accomplishing much. All right, moving on. All but one of the judges smiled in return, but Tamara ignored them. Her eyes flicked to Oris. He stood still, unmoving, quietly evaluating her movements. Tamara had a feeling that he knew how much of what she did was just for show. He had always been more perceptive than the other adults. Was his expression sad? Patiently, she waited in the center of the arena, while putting the adults who murmured and whispered to each other. All except Oris, who continued to watch her. The signal she'd been waiting for appeared in the form of her trainer for the day, waving her toward the arena's exit. She bowed again to the judges before leaving, but they were too caught up in their discussion to notice. Oris saw and responded with a slight incline of his head when she left the field. Tamara gritted her teeth. She was only important to them when she was demonstrating her skills. Otherwise, she was just a tool sitting on a shelf, waiting for its moment. So the first thing I'm going to point out is that this paragraph is kind of big. 11, almost 12, 11.1 lines long. And I did feel like it needed a break in here. So it's 11 lines long in Google Docs, which means that when it's printed on a book, it's going to get smushed in. It'll probably be between 15 and 17 lines long, depending on the size of the book, whether it's 6x9 or 5x8. And the area where I felt like, oh, this is where she should have broke was right here. Just because this line, I liked this line. It stood out to me as, the crux. So I like it. So I think we're going to add that there and then go back. This part was awkward with the unmoving and then the movements. And still and unmoving mean the same thing. You don't really need both. Like still unmoving, quietly evaluating. This is a little bit much for his description. I think less is more in most instances when it comes to things like this, especially when you're saying the same thing twice. So he stood still, quietly evaluating her movements, and then that doesn't have that double there. This I didn't really get. I don't know if it's a typo. I'm looking at it again, trying to figure out if I'm like missing something. Sometimes you read and the meaning just like escapes you. But patiently she waited in the center of the arena, while putting the adults who murmured and whispered to each other. I don't know how to fix that, because I don't know what's trying to be said. So I'm just gonna highlight this. And we're gonna say, I don't know. It's a mystery. Color is not important. So I also think we can have a paragraph break here, because now we're going from her observations and Oris. Like this is all about Oris, and this section is about her. This section is about Tamara and how she feels about these people. So it's all related, but just because it's related doesn't mean it should share a paragraph. One paragraph's topic should flow into the next paragraph's topic. As she left the brightness of the arena for the dim light of the dormitories, Tamara felt herself relax. It was a strange home, but it was hers, And here in the dorms, there were no people waiting and watching to see her succeed or fail. The dorms and the whole training grounds themselves had been designed to house dozens of people. But for the last 5 years, these considerable resources had been focused on just one. Cut it off there. Okay, so this Tamara felt herself relax. That's an area where you're creating a little bit of POV distance. And previously in this, there's not a lot of POV distance. It's her thoughts, it's her POV, and you don't really need to say she felt herself relax. You can just say she relaxed. It's just a little bit awkward when you say she felt herself relax, and it creates some distance that doesn't benefit the story, in my opinion. So Tamara relaxed. And whenever I get to things like these in my own writing, I feel like it's usually a habit. It's usually not something that you've just done once. So I've got a laundry list of all my bad habits. So I would put felt herself and any other POV distance things you might come across on that list, so that you can just use the search feature. You know, you can do it here in Google Docs. You can hit Finder. I don't want it to take me other places in the document, but type it in and you can find all the instances of it and see if you really need that there or not. I feel like there's probably exceptions. There's exceptions to every rule where you are going to want to do that, but I don't think here is one of them. So that's the detail work, but I am going to point out a sort of pattern I'm seeing. Like almost every sentence here is a description of like the people in their thought. Tamara, she, they, Tamara, she, all but one of the judges, her, he, Tamara. So what I'm saying is that it's all like every sentence starts with a person, and you know that sort of pattern, it's just like very heavily loaded with character stuff, which is good, but I think it also contributes to this feeling like the people are sitting on the surface of the story, and you could probably make this feel a little bit richer if you included the atmosphere and the setting. Because right now we're just kind of in empty space. Like we know that this is an arena, but we have no idea how anyone's dressed, what it looks like, what anything looks like. Her sword is just a regular sword. There's nothing, there's not a single description of anything in this. There's no setting, and the people are all currently just NPCs, basically. I mean, Oris gets the most attention, and even he is just standing quietly, evaluating her movements. You know, he's not doing much, and there's nothing about what he looks like. I mean, is this arena like a Hunger Games type arena where like the people are dressed crazy and fancy, or are they, you know, just in plain clothes? Are they monks? Like, it could be anything right now. And so I've got nothing to sort of build this image in my mind with. And I think that would definitely help just to ground us. Not too much. You don't want too much description, but I think this is one of the few areas where I'm going to say I would like some more description of the setting and just a little bit about the people. And you don't even have to like make whole new sentences. You don't have to add, I think maybe adding like one paragraph and then just kind of beefing up these other sentences with little bits of description to make these sentences kind of pull a little bit more weight. Sorry. Overall, I think you can do that and be a little bit too time intensive for me to go through and do all that, especially since I have no idea what the world looks like or what the people look like. Jake, please. Nobody wants your butt in the camera. And you're rubbing against the mic. Okay. So that's going to be my biggest advice here is, you know, all these little things, they don't matter too much, but I think just grounding this with a little bit more setting, um, you know, the sand under her feet. If there's sand, I don't know, maybe it's mud. Um, you know, is she dirty? Is she muddy from like her fighting and stuff? Um, is she bruised? You know, there's not even any kind of like there's no sensory input here. This is all visual, like it's all what's happening. So there's just no sensory input here. It's all just kind of events that are happening. Even the visuals are not fleshed out. So, and I mean, you've got other senses aside from sight too. You know, never forget about your smells and your feelings and taste. And don't bite me. Things like that. So overall, though, as far as the character work goes, I think this did a really good job of establishing this character, establishing her age, her mood, and setting up, you know, a little bit of the conflict. You know, you can kind of tell where this is heading from this, which is good. It gives you a good sense of what you're getting into.